Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation of adoption process and laws in Texas. My name is Nia Murray. I am Programs Coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included in the partnership is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, and joining us today is Ms. Myra Hippolyte, and also our partner with the Houston Bar Association. On behalf of them is our presenter for today, Ms. Barbara Patterson with the Harris County Domestic Relations. But included in the partnership is also Lone Star Legal Aid, the Earl Carl Institute, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Harris County Appraisal District, and Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. And together we make up A Month of Service. And basically what A Month of Service is a collaboration of these 8 different organizations that come together on a monthly basis and offer a variety of workshops, resources, and information relative to community empowerment, asset building, asset protection, and maintaining of generational wealth. We know that there are a lot of folks in a lot of underserved communities that don't have access or don't know about a lot of information, especially those related to legal concerns or civil legal matters. So we wanted to provide a platform or an opportunity for us to reach out to the community and provide that information so that we can help them pass that information along to other folks in the communities as well. So we've been doing this collaboration probably for the last 5-6 years or so. And we used to be out in the community doing these sessions in person, but of course we've had to adjust and adapt due to COVID. And we didn't want to stop doing what we were doing. So we're offering these workshops now on a virtual platform. This platform has allowed us to reach even more people. We have folks that are not only within the city of Houston, but Harris County, the surrounding counties throughout the state of Texas, and around the country, actually, that have actually tuned in to view these presentations. On behalf of the Houston Bar Association, any of our legal service workshops that we offer that has a course number beside it, if you are an attorney, you are entitled to receive free CLE credits for viewing or participating in this virtual workshop. So definitely take advantage of that if you are an attorney. Just want to kind of give a little disclaimer. The information that we provide here today is for educational purposes only. If you do find yourself in need of any civil legal assistance, we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners for more assistance. If you have more questions on behalf of in regards to the topic that we have today, I'm sure Ms. Patterson is going to be providing you all with some resources for you to get that assistance that you're going to need in regards to the adoption process. So I'll go over at the end a little bit more detailed information about some of the other presentations that we've got scheduled for this month. But if you do have questions while we're here, here's the opportunity to ask whatever questions it is that you like. However, we do want to make sure that we try to protect your privacy as much as we possibly can. So we ask that you keep your questions to be as general as you can without divulging any personal detail information, you know, where you live and children's names and things of that nature. So we want to protect that as much as we can. We are recording this session, so a link will be provided to everyone that has registered. In addition to that, we are broadcasting live on our social media platform at Amos Houston TX on Facebook. So if you're tuning in there, please feel free to type whatever questions that you may have into the comment section, and we will make sure that it gets addressed at the end of the presentation. So with that being said, I'd like for us to go ahead and introduce our partners and our presenter, and we will move right along with the presentation. So Ms. Myra.
Thanks, Ms. Nia, and welcome, Ms. Deborah. It's amazing and wonderful to see you today. We're very privileged to have you as a presenter. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myra Hippolyte, and I work with the City of Houston Department of Neighborhoods under the direction of Division Manager Paul Green. On behalf of Mayor Sylvester Turner and Director Takasha Francis, we want to welcome you to the Month of Service Partnership. This partnership is all about giving back free information to the Houston, Harris County, State of Houston community. We want to let you know that, guys, you're not alone. We have a team of partners that want to let you know that whenever you're going through a stress in your life or something is going on in your life, you have a team of partners that have all the information you need to at least to get started in helping you out through whatever stressor you're going through. You know, a lot of times we went through a winter storm Uri, we've gone through hurricanes. One of my coworkers just went through a flood in her house with a pipe bursting. She didn't know who to call, what to do. When she talked to the insurance agent adjuster, what did she needed to do? Well, she watched our virtual workshop on Facebook and she realized, oh, I got to go step 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what it's all about. That in whatever stressor, and I love what Nia always says, it's our everyday life. We're all living a day, every day there's something going on in our lives, but we want to make sure that we have a team of partners that can assist you in giving you whatever information you need to make the right decisions. Thanks everyone. You guys have a great day. Stay safe. And look, I am going to enjoy learning so much about adoptions today. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Deborah, go right ahead.
All right. Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Deborah Patterson, and currently I'm the Director of Family Court Services at the Domestic Relations Office here in Harris County. I've been here about 2 years, and prior to that, I'm a retired family court judge. I was a judge for 13 years, and I was the associate judge in the 257. So I know a lot about adoption. 2 of my 4 children are adopted, and they were adopted in different states, one in Michigan and one in Connecticut. And then I became a CPS worker in Connecticut, where I did adoptions. And I dealt with the children who were available for adoptions. I selected families who we would place the children with, and I appeared in court to talk about whether or not these kids should be adopted. And then as things went on and I became a lawyer and then a judge, I granted adoptions. And I did that for many years. And so I've spent a lot of time doing that. And now I supervise the custody evaluators in the DRO who are doing doing adoption evaluations to get these kids placed and to allow the judges to approve the adoption. So there's a lot about adoptions that I know. Now there's probably a lot of questions you could ask me that I probably can't answer, but that's the nature of law. And that's why we have huge, thick law books that talk about all the different laws and what you can do and what you can't. And even lawyers and judges spend a lot of time discussing what they means and what and means, trying to figure out exactly what the law is. Adoption is governed by Chapter 162 of the Texas Family Code. So that's where everybody goes to look to see what the requirements are and things like that. The effect of an adoption is to create a parent-child relationship between a child who is not born to a certain adult, a certain parent, and that parent. And there's different ways that you can do it. Children have to be free, however, to be able to be adopted. Now, what does that mean for a child to be free to be adopted? It means they have no legal parent. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can do that. And sometimes it's done before a child becomes available for adoption. And sometimes it's part of the process when you decide you want to do an adoption. And it's a termination of parental rights. And sometimes there's a lot of different occasions that happen with the termination. And sometimes people agree. And those are called voluntary terminations, where somebody signs a voluntary relinquishment. That's probably, I would say, the majority of them. Doesn't mean that there's not a lot of cases in the family courts where people are trying to stop terminations, but I would say a good portion of them are voluntary relinquishments, where one or both of the parents have decided that they are willing to relinquish their parental rights and give them to somebody else. Now, there's very specific forms people have to fill out. They have to be perfect. If there's a little line on the bottom of a page that has to be initialed, and if it's not initialed, then it's not a valid relinquishment. So the courts are very picky because in order to have a good adoption, you must have a good termination. One of the judges I knew did a termination and then adoption and placed these children with this great adoptive family on a farm, and they were there 3 years, and the parents decided to file a lawsuit. They proved that the termination was lacking in a few minor issues that you would say, what's the big deal? And the termination was overturned, and consequently the adoption was overturned. And the police came and took the children from the home that they had been given to, where they felt comfortable, where they felt happy, and things disintegrated. Now that's the last thing judges or anybody else wants to have happen, because it's traumatic for everyone around, and especially for these kids. So in order to have a good, solid adoption that everybody's good with, you have to have a good termination. Now, when I adopted my 2 kids in the various states, they had already been terminated. So because I wasn't involved in the law at that time and didn't know a lot, I just took these babies and thought it was great. And I didn't worry too much about the legal stuff that had happened before. Now that I'm in this venue and have seen and dealt with the various issues that come up, I've realized how important the termination process is. Now, when you talk about, and that means essentially, so the child has to be free from adoption. Now, there's also contested adoptions, which means in the family code, there's a myriad of reasons why a court can terminate the rights of a biological parent. Now, as I say, sometimes it's both parents, sometimes it's one parent. But when you ask the court for something, when you're asking the court to terminate somebody's rights and then to allow you to adopt, in your pleadings, in your paperwork, you have to list the reasons why someone should be terminated. And there's things like they voluntarily left the child alone or with somebody and not the parent and never said they were coming back. Now that happens a lot. People are not married. People get together, they have this baby, and a parent disappears, leaving the other parent with the child. And sometimes they don't know where they are, and that is a ground to terminate the rights of that parent. There's also putting the child in endangering conditions. So leaving the child with a relative who you know is a drug addict, or a parent who's a drug addict, or a criminal, or has some serious mental health issues, that could be construed as leaving the child in a dangerous situation. So what you do there is that's what you plead, that the child is in this dangerous condition and it's unsafe for him or her to remain there. There's also failed to support. Now, a lot of people think if you don't support your child, you leave your child and you don't support your child, you can be terminated. The problem is it's a legal matter. And so in order for the courts to be able to terminate on that issue, remember, you have to have at least one issue to terminate on. You have to provide proof of whether or not the parent who's missing and hasn't paid is able to do that. And so unless you have 12 months showing that somebody made money and just didn't send it, that's not a real easy ground for an attorney to prove. So they usually don't use that one, because quite often if somebody's in the wind, you don't know if they work, you don't know if they have the ability to support that child. There's certain criminal convictions that can allow you to terminate the rights of a parent. And when you prove that there were certain criminal conditions, and there's a lot of them, there's at least 20 relinquishment grounds and more actually, but those are the ones that stand out. So you can terminate based on the kind of a crime somebody did. You can also terminate and make the child available based on the fact that somebody's convicted and is in prison and will be in prison a certain length of time. If that's the case, a termination can be requested based on the idea that a parent is not going to be available. No matter how good of a parent that person was, that parent won't be available to parent the child because that parent's in prison and perhaps won't be available for parole or probation for 10 years. And so that child needs a parent now. And so that's one of the grounds. The other ground is, and we'll talk about CPS in a minute as a way to get children. CPS, if they file a lawsuit and the parents are involved in a lawsuit, quite often the court gives the parents specific things they have to do. You have to go to drug treatment, you have to show up for this, you have to take drug classes, all sorts of things that you're required to do in order to get your child back from CPS if they've taken your child. If you don't do them, that's a ground, that's a reason why somebody can ask the court to terminate the parent's rights. And CPS has a lot of different aspects. They work with the parent, they try to get them involved in parenting, but sometimes people have so many issues and problems, they have trouble taking care of themselves, let alone their children. And so the courts recognize that and they give them a chance, but kids can't wait forever. I remember in Connecticut when I was a social worker talking to an attorney, and he was like, we need to give mom another chance. We need to give mom another chance. And my feeling was sometimes they've had enough chances because it's not about mom. It's not about dad. It's about what's best for that child at this time. Now, the kid has a lifetime after they're 18 in terms of their biological parents, their adoptive parents. But right now, the courts are looking for a stable, consistent, loving home that's going to protect and help that child grow into a decent human being with not a lot of baggage, with not a lot of things that are sort of hanging on and causing that child a lot of problems. The court also has to finally determine whether or not it's in the best interest of these kids to be adopted, to be terminated, and then to be adopted. Quite often, the courts won't look at just a blank termination. Sometimes a parent hates the other parent so much, and there are grounds, there are reasons to terminate that other parent, but they just want to be rid of that parent because they don't like them. The other parent's okay, fine, I'll sign off. But with no adoption, the court's hesitant to do that. Because if you look at the parents and you're thinking about their needs and their goals and what they want, it's reasonable to say, okay, maybe they don't want to be around each other and things like that. But the question is always, well, how is this better for the child to have no parent rather than a parent who at least pays child support or things like that? You can protect a child from a parent who wouldn't be good at visitation by making other orders. So quite often the courts are hesitant just to terminate. Now, if you have somebody, it's a teenager who goes on the internet and it's very clear that the parent has done certain things that the teenager is ashamed of or embarrassed, sometimes it's reasonable to terminate those rights without an adoption. But the court hates to leave a child with no parent because no matter where these parents are, when you make a baby, there's two parents, whether or not they're here or in some other country or in the wind. So they like to sort of make sure that that happens. The best interest, the courts look at what's best for the child now and in the future. That best interest test is used in many, many things in family law. When they look at adoptions, when they look at divorces, when they look at custody agreements, they always are coming back to, but what's in the best interest of this child? And you look at, there's a list in the code, but everybody has their own feeling as well. What's really best interest for a child? Is it how the home is? Is it how the parents treat them? Do they go to school? Are they supported with that? Is there money enough in the home so the child can eat? Now, best interest doesn't mean that somebody is on food stamps and working and struggling financially. That's not a reason to say that's not in the child's best interest. So the courts realize that you don't have to have a perfect home. You don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to have any of those things. You have to have the wherewithal to want to be a parent, to put this child as your first priority, and to make a difference for this kid. And you can do that almost no matter what your circumstances, if you're mature enough to put the child first. So the courts are aware of that, and they've made rules about you can't discriminate against certain families just based on economic or things like that. They look at each family and each home individually before they make those decisions. There's also, if a dad is unmarried and the mother and father want to terminate the rights, sometimes dad find out that he's not the genetic father. So he petitions the court. He asks the court to terminate his rights. Now, that's a relatively new law that he can do that, but there's hoops he has to go through. And just showing up and saying, here's some genetic testing, I'm not the dad, isn't enough. So they have to contact an attorney, they have to look at the code, they have to do what's necessary. But somebody who has the belief that they've been a parent, been the biological father, and find out later that they are not, there is a means that you can go through to relinquish the rights of that child. And then the court is concerned about, well, who is the father of the child? If, in order to make a child free for adoption, the father of the child must be dealt with. If a mother comes into an attorney's office and says, I don't know who the dad is, it could be this person or this person, or I really have no idea who the dad is, that person still must be terminated, because the child's not free to be adopted by a home if there's another parent out there, regardless of where the parent is. Now, there's ways in the code that people can do that. You can terminate an unknown father, and quite often, we'll talk about CPS in a minute. CPS does that. They name a father, and then they also terminate an unknown father, because they want to cover all the bases. They want to make sure that if we're naming Mr. Smith as the dad and come to find out on down the road, he really wasn't the biological father, but they find out different ways, at least they've terminated the unknown father that nobody knows. And what happens is those people are, they have to be served, and you don't know who they are. So it's published that there's in the paper, the court signs a document that the attorney can file something and put it in the paper saying, there's this child, we're looking for the unknown father. They appoint an attorney to represent that unknown father, and the attorney appears in every court hearing and generally objects and says, well, I've been trying to find the unknown father, but I don't know who he is. Nobody's come forward, and they will terminate. They question mom a lot. The attorney who's appointed for the father questions mother about who that might be. The attorney that's appointed for the child, we'll talk about that in a minute, that person also will question the mother about who it might be. Sometimes you just don't know. In Texas, we have something called the paternity registry. And that is something that if you have intercourse with somebody you're not married to, technically you're supposed to register that you did that. And if she turns up pregnant, I'm speaking to the men, if she turns up pregnant, then your name is on the registry that you had intercourse with a woman, this is her name, and she might be pregnant. The paternity registry always has to be searched when you do an adoption and or a termination and then subsequently adoption, in case people don't know, who the father is. And if mother's married, then the presumption is, the law says, we presume that the husband is the father. But if she's not married, then a paternity registry search has to be done. Let me tell you, I've never found anyone who's registered on the paternity registry search. However, it's in the law, it's available. Probably some people register, but I don't think most people know about that. But that's another way, another grounds, another reason that you can terminate somebody. If you can't find them, you don't know where they are, you don't know who they are, then they can be terminated based on the fact that they've not done anything and they haven't registered with the paternity registry. Myra's looking up there like, what? I've never heard of that before. But yeah, it's something that's in the code. There is a dad out there, even if we don't know. When you file for your adoption, usually a termination is filed with it. It's in the same paperwork that's filed with the court, and it's a termination adoption. The courts look at them separately, but they're included in the same request to the court, which I call pleading, okay? And what happens is they deal with the termination and the adoption separately. When that is filed with the court appoints in a private case an amicus who's an attorney to represent the interests of that child. That is an attorney who investigates, becomes part of the case. The adoption doesn't happen, or the termination adoption doesn't happen unless that attorney agrees to it. These are attorneys who are very skilled in talking to kids, talking to adoptive families, understanding what the dynamics are of the family, and they make recommendations to the court. Now, there's going to be some other people who make recommendations too, because the judge can't go out and figure out what's best for this kid. The judge just sits there and has to rely on these professionals to tell them if this is a good idea or not. Because you place a child in a home as a judge and you hope for the best, and you have no control over it after they leave and everybody's got their little adoption t-shirts on and they go out to lunch. You have no control. So what you do is you pick really good people to be the amicus for the children, and to, in the custody evaluation, we'll talk about that in a minute, the adoption evaluation, you pick an evaluator who's really good and who can get to the bottom of why people are adopting and what they're doing. They go through the termination first, and what happens is a lot of times the amicus will read the paperwork, will explain to the attorneys what they have in there and what they don't. The adoptive parents who are trying to relinquish these kids or trying to adopt these kids usually have to pay for the amicus. And because that's not something, they're attorneys, they're making their living as well, and that's not something the county pays for in a private case. Now, CPS cases are a little different. They are cases that are, the children come into care or come before the court or noticed by the court because somebody's made a referral to CPS and has had concerns about the children based on the parents' behavior. And the children quite often have been removed. Not always, but generally by the time it comes to court, these kids have been removed. When they are removed, they are also assigned an attorney. That attorney is called an ad litem. And that attorney doesn't look at best interests as much as looks at what the child wants. Now, do those attorneys look at best interest too? Of course they do. But technically they're an attorney. An ad litem is an attorney that works for you. So they sort of consider that in the totality, knowing the little kids can't determine what's best for them, but they're there. So they're involved in every court hearing, just like the amicus. They talk to the judge, they look at the circumstances, and the judge has repeat hearings in CPS cases that is mandated by the Texas Family Code as well, that talks about how often they have to come back so they can see the progress of what's happening with these cases. Now, sometimes these kids are removed prior, as I said, to getting into court, and sometimes they're removed after a court hearing where CPS attorney and witnesses from CPS give testimony to the judges about why these kids have been removed. Then they're generally placed in foster care, and they do their best to place these kids in a relative placement, because studies have shown that kids do much better if they're placed with grandma or aunt and uncle or somebody that they know. It gives the parents a little bit more stability and hope of getting these kids back because they have more of a support system. But sometimes the kids have to be placed in a foster care situation. CPS tries to keep them together. Sometimes you have family groups. You have 2 or 3 kids. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. These workers, these CPS workers agonize over where to put these kids. They're called late at night and they have to find a placement, and the kids are scared and upset. The parents are frantic and upset, even if they're the cause of and the reason for the children being removed. This is not an easy thing for those biological parents as well. But the kids are placed, and that's where they remain generally during the course of the CPS hearings and things like that. It takes CPS a while to work through the system, and it's over a year. It's supposed to be no longer than a year. Sometimes they get an extension, but parents are coming back. CPS is reporting if the parents are able to get to a better place where they can take their children back. Most kids either go back to their home or they stay in a relative placement, and that person might be made the guardian, the managing conservator of that child. And if that's the case, the court feels pretty comfortable if grandma takes the kid and she's in charge and she's the guardian, the managing conservator of these kids, then generally they feel comfortable. Parents can still visit, but they don't have the total responsibility. Sometimes, and what happens is if there is nobody, or if the agency thinks that the parents are concerning enough or their behavior has been concerning enough, they file to terminate those parents' rights. Now, usually CPS doesn't file to terminate the parents' rights with an adoption in mind. Sometimes they do if it's a relative. Sometimes the uncle says, look, terminate the rights. I want to adopt. I don't just want to be a conservator. I don't want to just be the person that sort of takes care of the kids. I want to be the parent. And so then they will file that as well, but they do it in a separate pleading. So when CPS comes in, they file the termination, and it's a contested termination quite often, not always. Sometimes the parents will also sign a relinquishment, like I talked about before, and sometimes they won't. If they do, then it proceeds through the court system, just like a termination in a private termination where somebody signed the relinquishment. I also want to say that the courts quite often appoint a CASA volunteer, which is a court-appointed guardian that is, and it's in CASA is something in Harris County that you could call. You can volunteer to be a volunteer for these cases. We found them really effective because they're not attorneys, but they visit the kids, they visit the schools, they talk to the teachers, they talk to the relatives, and they add more information to the court about what should happen with this child. And that is the CASA volunteer. Not everybody takes them. Not every CPS case has them. It's up to the judge if they appoint one. But when I was on the bench, they were very helpful, and I thought they were very good. They can work with the ad litem to help decide what's best for these kids. So anyways, so once the termination of those kids happen, then they're also free for adoption, like we talked about before. Those are quite often where you get the sibling groups. When people want to adopt a group of kids, or they fall in love with one little kid, they've seen a picture, or they've met him at their kid's school or whatever, but he has two siblings, then quite often they're considered if they want to take the group. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 16-year-old. And a 16-year-old has different ideas about who they want to be adopted by, or they don't want to be adopted, which is a reasonable thing for an older kid, because children have to agree to be adopted if they're over 12 or older. So if you have an older teenager who doesn't want to be adopted, but quite often says, but I realize my 3-year-old and 2-year-old siblings need that family, then sometimes that's what happens. So that's the CPS adoption. When people go through that route, they hire their own attorney to do the adoption part because the termination's already been done. And we'll talk about the specific things they have to do with the adoption, but those kids are free for adoption. So that works as well. Let's see. Sometimes people talk about foster to adopt, and that's a difficult thing, because what happens is people go into that program or that concept with the idea they really want to adopt, but they're afraid they can't get babies. They're afraid they can't get the kind of children they want, things like that. And so they say, okay, we'll take these children in and foster them. And if the parent is finally terminated, then we want to adopt the child. If they're a good home, that's great, but that's very emotionally stressful for an adopted parent who really wants a child. And as a foster parent, and I can remember working with foster parents when I was in CPS, you walk the line of trying to support them, trying to be helpful, trying to be positive, but also trying to collect information on them in case they weren't going to be good enough to continue to parent this child. So it's a strange situation. You're for the parent, but the more attached you get to this child, you're less for the parent. And but I don't think CPS has a specific program. Some states do, that is called a foster to adopt program. But a lot of people go into foster care with that idea. Now, in order to do foster care through CPS, you have to do classes. They might discuss that with you. I've never been through their classes. So it's a reasonable thing that they would talk to the foster parents about what their goal really is. But when they do an adoption through CPS, the child's available, but you're sort of on your own. Quite often the courts will pay for, sometimes will pay for the adoption attorney. A custody evaluation is done through CPS, so it's sort of handled in-house, but it still goes through the court procedures, and it still does what you do in a private adoption, making you establish a parent-child relationship between these parents and the child. Now, where do these kids come from? As I've said, CPS, there's available kids. There's private agencies, like Catholic Charities, various places like that. People go to look for kids that are available. And depending on the situation, those are children who've been relinquished, usually by both parents. Usually, and I'm not sure exactly with the private agency, whether the kids are totally free and clear, but usually you can go that way. You can also go through CPS is the public, you have the private, and private adoptions happen a lot. A young woman gets pregnant, she doesn't want to keep the baby, she wants her brother to have the baby. The brother's agreeing to take the baby, he and the wife, and so they take the baby home from the hospital. They follow all the requirements, mother relinquishes, and the child is adopted by a relative. Sometimes it's somebody in church. I've had a lot of those, that everybody goes to church and somebody says, you know, my niece is having a baby. Are you still interested in doing that? They go to an attorney. You have to be real careful that people aren't doing things underhandedly. And so if it's not a child placed by a parent or an agency, then there's other requirements that have to be met with regard to that. But a lot of children are obtained that way. Usually those are the younger children, because people know people who want to adopt, and that's how quite often that happens. As I said, let's see. Let me mention Indian adoptions. Used to be, if there was a child with any Indian heritage, Indian blood, depending, I think it's 1/16, maybe it's 1/8 of Indian blood, those kids must be treated differently, because years ago, they were adopting all these Indian children out to families who weren't part of the tribe, and the tribe was being decimated. And so they pushed for laws, and what the law is called ECWA. It's the Indian Welfare Act, and it talks about, in order to adopt a child who has Indian genetic history, Indian blood, you have to contact the tribe and they have to give their permission. Otherwise, that child goes back and is dealt with by the tribe and adopted within the Indian tribe. Adoptions can be overturned. All the pleadings now talk about that. The court asks about that because you don't want a child placed and adopted and then later find out that there is Indian contact, that the tribe should have been contacted, because these tribes have taken some of this litigation way up to higher courts to have them overturned because they feel that they have legally, they have the right to deal with their own children. So that is also something that's based. We don't face that as much here as probably in some of the other states, but clearly that's a consideration. International adoptions. Sometimes people come to the courts with kids that they've adopted in other countries. What they want is they want full faith and credit, that this adoption is a valid adoption here in the United States. And the courts can give that to them. But what they have to look at is interesting. They have to look at whether or not the initial termination done in the foreign country was done with regard to our civil rights, our rights to be notified, things like that. They have to show that in the other country that the adoption was done in a fair manner, with everybody having the right to object to it, with it happening through the courts and not the baby was just sort of taken or done underhandedly. If they can prove that, then it's registered here and it becomes like a US order. And so we do get those over, and a lot of times people want that. The courts look at why this adoption is happening. Quite often the courts look at if the children still have contact with their parents. They question immigration issues. So it's a complicated matter to do that, but there's an issue about whether or not bringing children over, the adoptive parents want this to be a full adoption here in the United States. Probably most of the adoptions that I saw dealt with parents who were deceased in the other country quite often. And so if they can provide birth certificates that the children were left without parents, then it's a much easier thing. So that there's downfalls with that. It's hard to do. If people use an agency and go over to another country through an agency, that is all dealt with. And but if people choose to do it on their own, then there's an attorney probably who's very well versed in international adoption should be probably contacted, because it's a tricky situation and you want to make sure, as I say, the termination's good. You got a good termination, then you can have a good adoption. Step-parent adoptions are probably the most prevalent adoptions that they do. And those are generally the parents have been married, they haven't been married, but they've had this baby. Whether or not they've rocked along for a year or 6 years, there's all sorts of, the permutations are endless in terms of what's happened in these families. However, one of the parents remarries, and now there's a step-parent. And they decide, for a multitude of reasons, that the step-parent wants to step in and become the legal parent and establish that parent-child relationship between that child and the step-parent. So what happens is they file an adoption, termination adoption, and the spouse, the parent who's already the parent, must join in, because the code is very specific. If somebody wants to adopt, they must join their spouse in. So the biological parent and the new wife, say it's a dad, the new wife wants to adopt this child. Again, the child has to be free for adoption. The child is not free for adoption if the child has both parents. So the mom has to be dealt with in a termination. A lot of it, whether or not the court decides to terminate the mom, depends on a lot of factors. Now, most times that parent will sign the relinquishment. They don't have a relationship with the child. They're off doing something else. They've had other children. They have a boyfriend. They're whatever. And they're like, okay, fine. If you want to take this child, I'll let your new wife adopt her. And so they sign off on their relinquishment. Then the child's free to be adopted. And then the whole process steps in with regard to what has to be done to accomplish the adoption. Again, it has to have the pleadings in the plea. It has to have the grounds in the pleadings. Why? And one of the grounds is the parent voluntary relinquishes. So you don't have to get nasty with the grounds. You don't have to say mean things about the other parent. If they've decided what's best for their child is to let this other person raise their child, that works. And that's a lot of times what happens. There is, once you file for an adoption, there's things that have to be done before the court will grant it. The DRO, which I work for, the Domestic Relations Office, we offer services to the courts to do the custody evaluation. It doesn't have to be us. People can request their own private custody evaluators, but it's pretty expensive. And our custody evaluations are on a sliding scale, depending on your income. And it is, most of the courts send over the adoption evaluations to the DRO here. What we do is assign to someone, and those evaluators are licensed professionals. They're licensed social workers, like licensed therapists. We have a PhD who's a psychologist who is also licensed. So everybody has a license and they know how to conduct these evaluations. Some have been here for 20 years. The code specifies exactly what has to happen in these custody evaluations. Like I mentioned before, the court doesn't know what's happening at this home. So they want you to be their eyes and ears. They can't visit the house. They can't talk to the teachers. The judge has to just hear the evidence from everybody and rely on them. So these custody evaluators have individual interviews with the parents, with the adoptive parent. They individually interview the kids if they're 4 or over. Some kids are more talkative than others. You get the idea that some kids really want to be adopted, some don't. I only had one child who was a teenager who, after they'd gone through the whole process, said, you know, I really don't want to do this. Parent was not very happy because they'd spent a lot of money, but kids are entitled to their voice. And that's one of the things that they do. They talk to the attorney who's representing them, this child, but they also talk to the evaluator. The evaluator goes out to the home. They check that it's a safe place to be. They talk to them about guns to make sure that if they have guns, they're put up and locked. They talk to them about if they have smoke detectors in their house. They're trying to get a bigger picture about whether or not this is a good placement. They see grades, they talk to teachers, they look at medical records to see if there's any medical needs with the kids. They talk to people who give recommendations. And then they make a recommendation about if it's a suitable home for these kids. They get criminal histories. Parents who are adopting have to have their fingerprints taken, and those fingerprints are sent to Austin. And the court gets back a report about if there's any criminal history. Just because you have a criminal history doesn't mean you can't adopt. A lot of it depends on when it was and why it was. Big issue too is if you've been honest with the evaluator. If you've told everybody, well, yeah, you know, I had this or that, or I, you know, when I was 16 and 17, I did these drugs, or, you know, I had a crash, or I had a bad check. Those kind of things the court looks at, but it doesn't preclude you from adopting. A lot of it depends on how mature you are now, when things happen, and the situation with the child. A lot of things happen with how old the child is. In reality, if you are the step parent and you're married to the parent, you're going to be there anyways. But the court won't make you the adoptive parent and responsible for this child unless they feel that you're safe and capable of being a parent. And that doesn't, and so I know people are worried about, well, you know, I had this arrest 12 years ago, or I dealt with that. It's case by case. That's when you talk to the amicus, the attorney for the child, and you discuss the situation. And so it's not something that precludes you from doing that. The evaluator also, they also do the criminal history. If the child's name is to be changed, that's dealt with. Anybody who's over 14 in the house, a criminal history has to be run, because quite often there are siblings. And so in these step-parent adoptions, all of a sudden you have a child the dad has and stepmom has, but the stepmom might have brought a couple other kids into the home. So they look at the whole situation about what's best for the kids. Just because the kid's in therapy doesn't mean that that's a problem. In fact, it's a positive thing that parents are being proactive in trying to figure out what's best for this kid and where's the best placement. So that's the gist of the step-parent adoption. They interview the siblings as well, and they get a really good picture of what goes on in the house by talking to the siblings of these, or the half siblings perhaps, or just the step siblings of these kids, because they will tell you a lot when they're sitting in their bedroom by themselves with you about what goes on at their house and what kind of dad or mom this person is. They talk about how they do in school, how everybody relates, what they do as a family for fun. They talk about, in adoption, a lot of them, they talk about fertility issues, whether or not they have children, whether they're going to have other children. It's very intrusive. And so to adopt, and whether you're adopting in a private adoption or both parents are adopting or step parents adopting, you have to be willing to answer questions that sometimes are uncomfortable. They ask you about your family of origin. How was it like growing up in your family? Did you have two parents? Was there abuse there? How did you handle it? How did you navigate your teen years? Things like that, and many people they just say what it was, and you can see that they've overcome many issues. And that doesn't stop you from being an adopted parent either. Because what they look at is now, and your propensity to be a good parent to this child right now. What can you give to this kid to help this kid grow up? Kids want to be adopted for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes they want the last name of the family. And so, because it bothers them that all their step siblings have a different last name. And that's quite often if stepdad is adopted. And so the kids want to be part of that. Sometimes the step parent asks the child, do you want me to adopt you? I'd like to adopt you. This is what this means. Sometimes the kid pushes it and really wants it to be adopted. In those situations, I've seen many people, stepfathers, big burly guys, that you would never think, just burst into tears when the court grants the adoption because they love these kids. Even the 13-year-olds who are obnoxious and who have to have their phone taken away sometimes, like we all do. But these are their children on an emotional level. And those are one thing that the court appreciates. However, as happy as adoptions are, there's always a loss. And there's a loss to these kids of the biological parent who couldn't raise them. And it might be no one's fault. They might have died. They might have been circumstances beyond their control, or they might have been drug addicts and couldn't get their life together because of how they were raised and stuff. But it's a loss. And it's a loss that these kids have to deal with for the rest of their lives. My daughter, who was adopted at 6 months, when she was a teenager, she said to me, and she knew the circumstances, she said to me, maybe I cried too much and that's why my mother gave me up. Now she knew that that wasn't it, but those things float through kids' heads always, and they have to learn as adults and as they go through their teenage years and as they get to be adults and parents, they have to come to terms with that. And we hope that adoptive parents are able to help them do that. Now, adoptive parents also have a certain amount of grief as well. They grieve the fact that they didn't give birth to this child. They love these kids, and depending on whether it's a private adoption or an agency through CPS, or it's your sister's child, they love these kids. But part of them is sad that they aren't part of the child's full story. It's the child's story, and they only came in late. And so they grieve for certain things. And they have to be aware that it's an emotional thing to adopt. And it's an emotional thing to adopt when they're babies, when they're 5 going to school, when they're at the 8th grade dance, when they're obnoxious to you at 16, and when they graduate from high school, forever. Once they get to be adults, believe me, it's better. But as children, they deal with those issues as the years go through, and adoptive parents need to be comfortable with that. When you adopt a kid, you fall in love with that child. It's easy to fall in love with a little baby. Not so easy to fall in love with a teenager, but people do. And I've known people that have adopted 2, 3, 4 teenagers who've been through the mill, who've been in all sorts of foster placements, but when they got to that home, that was the difference. And can I tell you what exactly the difference is? No, I don't know exactly. You look at these adoptive parents and you say, what is it about you that's changed for this kid that he feels home? And some people are able to do that. And that's what everybody looks for. People are capable of doing it. You can do it, but it's not always easy. It's not always easy with your biological kids. And I'm sure most of you know that. Okay. Adult adoptions. You can also do adult adoptions. And those are much simpler than anything because nobody's rights have to be terminated. You're an adult. You can be adopted pretty much by anybody you want to be adopted by if they want to adopt you. Now, why would you do that? Sometimes you get a teenager who's lived with a step parent for a long time, but their parent is sort of difficult. He won't sign the relinquishment. He won't do this. He won't do that. Nobody has the money. They just ride along. And all of a sudden the kid's 18. And the kid says, you know, you've always been my dad. You're my stepdad, but I feel like you've always been my dad. I want you to adopt me. And so they come in and an adoption is granted, and that step parent becomes like the biological parent of that child. The parent-child relationship is established. Now, that has implications with regard to wills and inheritance and things like that. But generally, it's an emotional connection that they want. If the child wants to change their last name, then they have to go through the same procedure that you would if you just wanted to change your last name. They have to get a criminal history. And as long as they're not changing their name for criminal matters, then that can be done as well. But there are adult adoptions that are very emotional. All the family comes in, everybody's happy, they're glad it happened, and the kids have wanted it for years. So children who are adopted have to reside with the petitioner, with the person for at least 6 months. So, but usually the process takes that long anyways. They want to see how the child is doing in the home, how they're behaving, what's happening, if the parent's able to do that. But while you collect all the different things, while you collect the references, while you collect the criminal history, while you look at all the medical stuff, while you make the home visits, that sort of is what happens during that 6 months. But they want the children to be there. Our evaluations take 60 days. They're allowed 60 days. And so generally it's filled up a lot of times just before Christmas. People want to go ahead and get it done because people are excited to do it, and the courts understand that. And so they do that. But the bottom line is they have to reside with the petitioner for 6 months. Okay, it can be waived, and there's most things in court can be waived. There's a lot of it shall happen in the court code, in the Texas Family Code, but there's a lot of caveats that say, however, the court can waive it. It's like the child who's 12 has to agree in writing to be adopted, but the court can waive that depending on the circumstances of the child, depending on their disabilities. So you can waive that. We recently had a very sad case One of our evaluators takes, as I say, 2 months to do the evaluation. We were called by an attorney who was interested in, the parents came to him and wanted a step-parent adoption, but the little girl was dying. She was 12 or 14. And she had some long-term illness that she had been dealing with for a very long time. And so we assigned it, we said, well, yeah, we'll get it started. And he said, I don't think she'll make the 2 months. And so one of our evaluators who's been here a long time volunteered to do that. And usually it takes 30 days to get CPS records. It takes quite a few days, quite a few weeks to get criminal history. We needed all that. So the mother, the adoptive mother could adopt this little girl who was dying. And our evaluator, I don't know how she did it, but she was able to do an evaluation within 2 days. And the courts agreed to set a special hearing. The little girl was in her hospital bed. And when the evaluator went to visit her, she said, are you the angel that's going to let me be adopted by my mom? And they got the adoption done and she died shortly after. So sometimes emotionally, it's so imperative for these kids to be adopted because the connection is there. And people who work with adoptions, whether the judge who agreed to set aside all sorts of time and work with the family, the attorney, the family law attorney who wanted to do it, or the evaluator, people did it because they cared and they knew how important it was. If you filed for adoption, the 2 parties and 1 person dies. So say 2 parties who are married or not related to the child or grandparents, and one of them dies, the petition still continues. So if grandma and grandpa are married and grandpa dies during the process, the adoption will still happen and grandma will be able to continue with the adoption. If both of them die, it's stopped. If they decide to divorce, it's excuse me, it's abated, meaning that it's put on hold until everybody determines what's going to happen. But courts are pretty sensitive to that. Okay. Now, there are some other issues. There used to be many issues with regard to cross-racial adoptions, and that was in the 70s. Finally, laws were passed that you couldn't discriminate, but there were a lot of feelings about, just like the Indians putting children back in the reservation, the minority social workers in the 70s were very concerned about taking minority children and placing them in homes that were not of the same ethnic diversity. And so they passed a law saying you couldn't consider it. As time has passed, nobody seems to care anymore. And I don't know. I mean, certainly everybody follows the law, but what I've seen is everybody's adopting everybody. So it's changed for the good because it doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. So then we moved to the LGBT community in terms of same-sex adoptions. When I started doing this in the 90s, that was a big issue. They wouldn't allow 2 of same-sex parents to adopt. So one parent had to adopt. Now that was before they were allowed to get married, or legally people could get married here. But one person had to adopt and the other person had to become like a conservator, like a guardian of the child. But they didn't have the parental rights. They were the guardian. And I say guardian, that's not the legal term. The legal term is conservator, managing conservator, which is a little confusing. But they couldn't do it together. People were very hesitant. They were worried about whether or not this was a good idea. Should they get the same-sex child? Should they get a different sex child? That has all changed. That is no longer an issue. People can adopt if they're decent parents and they know what they're doing and they're sensitive to these kids and they want to do a good job. And so the courts, the evaluators, it hasn't become an issue. But those things were issues and we worked through them. And people passed laws to make sure that people weren't hampered by other people's opinions about things that didn't matter. And so that's where we are with regard to that. There's something called open adoptions. And what that is allowing the parent who's terminated to be available or to be to have contact with the child after the adoption. Some adoptive parents agree to do that because they feel that the parent's not going to agree to relinquish the child. So there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's a relative, it's your sister's baby. You adopt the baby, and so sister's going to be there. She's going to be at functions. She's going to know what's happening. Sometimes people won't sign a relinquishment unless the parent agrees. Now, legally, you can't really do that. You can't say, I'll sign this relinquishment only on the with the agreement that you're going to allow me to have contact and stuff with the child and the family and things like that. But people make side agreements. The courts don't know about, the attorneys don't know about. It's risky business to agree to open adoptions. A lot of it depends on the circumstances of the people, how mature they are, whether or not they think of the child's welfare above their own. Some people just want to know. Some families send pictures. Some people just agree to do notes. It becomes a little onerous, I assume, as you're dealing with kids who get to be older and teenagers, and you got your own life and stuff, and you sort of forget this bio parent who still wants contact, and maybe they do and maybe they don't. Those are hard things to determine, and people have to make their own decisions about this. Now, sometimes you have no idea who the biological parent is, but if you have a step-parent adoption, or you have an adoption where somebody's come to you and said so-and-so is a baby, quite often you do know. If you were involved in a CPS case and you've adopted these children, you know who the parents are, you've dealt with them. So a lot of times these adoptions can be sort of open, but the court won't order it to be that way. And it has to be determined where you are as a parent in terms of what you think is best for the child. There's a lot of issues you have to decide what's best for the child. The biggest one is whether or not you tell the child. Now, that is a huge sticking point, because sometimes a step-parent, and usually these are step-parent adoptions, will come in when the child's 18 months old, and just for 5, 6, 10 years, act as the parent without doing anything with regard to the biological parent. And then they decide they want to adopt, or the child wonders why I have a different last name than my little brother who's 5. Courts now, and probably through the urging of a few of us judges, a lot of them are not granting the adoptions unless the children know. First of all, your amicus, the attorney that's appointed for the child, has to go out and talk to this child. So you have to give a reason why you're out there to talk to the child. It's not a good idea to lie to kids, because these amicus have to go out and say, well, I'm here because we're changing they want to change your name. Kids are like, well, okay. And then they ask a lot of questions, but they're not being straight with the kid. Once the kid turns 12, they have to agree. So they have to know. But you get the interim when they're old enough to sort of talk about it and discuss it before they're 12, that there's a lot of concern. Generally, it's because the parents are afraid. And I understand that. They're afraid these kids are going to be upset. They're afraid they're going to be mad, and they don't know what to do. We a lot of times it said talk to a therapist, you can do it in a setting, but the parents tend to make more of an issue about it than the kids do. The kids, it is their story. It's who they are. And it's difficult for the parents to understand. Remember, I talked before about how concerning, how some of these parents feel grief, and how they feel sadness about not having given birth to these kids. And so it's hard for them to tell. If you start when a baby's 18 months and you say, oh my gosh, the first time I saw you, you know, you were running around after the dog at the foster home and stuff like that, that becomes their story. And that's okay. They're comfortable with it. A lot of times you tell a 4 or 5-year-old and you talk about, you know, first dads and forever dads. And sometimes there's different ways to build families. And this is how we chose to build our family. And now you have your forever dad. Kids are like, oh, okay. And sometimes kids are like, I knew there was something going on. Every time I walked in the room and grandma and Andy so-and-so were there, they would stop talking. I knew something was happening. And so the problem becomes if you wait for something and it's happened and they're later and they find out, or a court doesn't make you tell the child or whatever, they are angry. You've lied to them for years and years. And it's okay to be adopted. It's that's sort of who you are. That's okay. But parents are scared. And quite often I've had them say, you have to tell, blah, blah, blah. They would come back and they would be absolutely amazed that the child was not damaged. They weren't upset. And so that's part of what happens. And parents question themselves about if they're a good enough parent and things like that. When you adopt a child that's not yours, you think of those things. But as kids get older, you face things in adoption, emotional things that are sort of difficult. I mean, kids get mad at you when they're teenagers. And the first time they stomp upstairs and say, you're not my real mom, that is a sadness in your heart. The bottom line is, I am your mom. And that's the way it is. So adoptive parents need to understand those kind of things. When kids are mad at you, they say things directed to hurt you. And yeah, that's upsetting. But as they grow older and get more mature, that goes away. But they need to recognize that some of those things are going to come. And there's lots of ways to build families. There's lots of things that you can do to make families, and one of them is adoption. And it's a really good way to do it. But it never gets easier to tell a child, because they always say, I'm going to tell her when she can understand. No, they don't really understand for a long time, but it never gets easier. It's never like, oh, okay, now he's 10 and I can tell them, and they just put it off and put it off. And so it's very difficult. And if you tell them before they fully grasp it, it's just, as I say, who they are. So let's see. Okay, I think that's probably, and I want to say the emotional aspects of adoption. It's always a loss. You can overcome it. We overcome losses all the time, but it's always a sad thing. The relinquishing parent is always struggling with that. And even if you never see that parent again, they deal with that. My son's, it was a private adoption. And so, excuse me. Wait a minute. Hold on, I'm gonna sneeze. Maybe not. When my son was placed with us, we didn't know his name. We didn't know anything about his mother. When he was a teenager, he must have registered in some registry somewhere. And when he was in his mid-20s, a young woman called him and said, I think you might be my brother. She had just been told by her mother that she'd given a baby away. Well, he was all worried. You know, he said, oh, maybe it's a scam. Maybe you're going to try. I said, Aaron, you don't have anything. They can't scam anything from you. So don't worry about that. But he finally did talk to his mom. And we lived here in Texas. She lived in Connecticut. And he gave me permission to go out and meet with her before he met with her. Now he's in his late 20s this time. And so I made arrangements to meet with her. We met in a diner and she came in. I'm sure it was very hard for her, very hard, and hugged me and then sat with me at lunch and held my hand for the whole lunch. She said, I thought of him every day. She finally met with him. He's gotten close to some of his siblings, his half siblings, which is wonderful. That one turned out well, but it was very emotional for her and it was hard. I had sent her a book of pictures from the time he was 6 months old until he graduated from high school. She said it took her weeks to look at it because it was so sad. was very hard for her. But people give up their kids or relinquish their kids for various reasons. One is altruistic reasons, and they know they can't parent the child. A lot of times people have issues and, you know, drinking, or they're involved or whatever, and they just can't think of anybody else. But a lot of these people who give up their kids do it because they know they can't, and they want a better life for these kids. So it's emotional. It's emotional for the adoptive parent, because you look at that child and you wish that he'd always been with you, and you're aware that there's other complications with regard to these relationships. So, and the adoptee, even adults, are searching. They don't know. They wonder what it could have been like, just like we all do. What if this would have happened? What if this would have happened? But it sort of never goes away. But I don't mean that negative, because that's okay. That's sort of the way we live. You're able to get these kids, you're able to adopt these kids, give them a better life, and they're part of your family forever. And that's why I say you can build families in many different ways. So that's about it. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yes,
What's here? Go ahead.
there are some questions on chat that they had asked initially.
Okay.
They asked transportation requirements to adopt, housing requirements for adoptees, and international adoption from Hague Convention country. I previously adopted 2 of my granddaughters. Would it take 2 years process to readopt? Question. Are there?
Those are 3 different questions, Myra. I just went and itemized them afterwards.
Okay, so let's go. I was going like, wow. Okay, let's go to the first one. Transportation requirements to adopt, housing requirements for adoptees, and international adoption from a Hague Convention country.
All right. I'm not sure what transportation requirements to adopt means. If that means
They
do
were
I have to have a
asking-
car?
Yeah, they
Go
were
ahead.
asking if there were housing or transportation requirements in order to be approved for adoption.
No. Now, is it tough if you are not making a lot of money, you have to take the bus everywhere? Yes, it's tough. That doesn't mean you can't adopt. If your house is a safe place and you're renting and it's in a housing project that you keep the child safe and you're watching that child and you don't let them go out to the playground by themselves and you're always there, that is not an issue. That we want parents who are on top of these kids to make sure they're safe. But no, you don't need a car, you don't need to own your home, nothing like that. And we look at you individually to make sure people grow up in all sorts of situations. It's how well their parents parent, how mature they are, and how well they can deal with their kids' issues that make the difference. So no, that's not an issue. With regard to the Hague Convention, that's a very complicated thing. There's a lot of rules with regard to the Hague Convention, and you would probably need to talk to an attorney. And I think your question is it easier to do an international adoption that has adopted the Hague Convention? I'm not sure exactly what it means. If that's the case, probably it would be. And that's why I say, if you want to do an international adoption, you need to go through an agency. You need to get some advice from those attorneys there who do this all the time. Okay, and then I see the next ones. Are there transportation requirements? No, okay. Okay, what is the policy? Yeah. I don't know exactly what the process would be with regard to adoption for the Hague Convention country. I think you would have to go to that agency. And then I'm not sure about, I previously adopted 2 granddaughters. Would it take a 2-year process to readopt? I'm not sure why you would need to readopt. A 2-year process says to me CPS involvement, but I don't know. As I say, the rules with CPS are they have to fish or cut bait really within a year. They can extend it another 6 months, but it has to be done by then. So nothing should take 2 years. And generally, you only need 6 months or 8 months. But if it's CPS, they're trying to give the parents a chance to work. But I'm not sure what readopting means. Once your
Additional grandchildren.
grandkids. Oh,
If she
additional
had
grandchildren.
yes, yes.
Oh, okay, all right. If it's through CPS, you have to kind of work on their timeline. 2 years seems like a long time. And if it's through CPS, you don't have much control because they have legal requirements they have to meet with regard to whether or not these children are available. If it's a private adoption or if your one of your children has given up the grandkids to you, it should not take long at all.
Then the next question was, what's the process for international adoption from a Hague Convention country? That's what they were asking.
Yeah, and what I said is Hague Convention is very specific. It's laws about how different countries treat each other and what they can do and what they can. It's very complicated. And I think you need to probably talk to an agency if you're interested in saying going over to Europe or adopting from various countries. And a lot of it's going to depend, it will be different whether they're Hague countries or not. And so certain countries are not, they don't follow the same rules, but I think you'd have to talk to a specialist in that.
Okay. Are there any other questions is there anyone in the virtual workshop that would like to unmute themselves and ask a question or raise your hand?
As I'm driving and going down, if nobody else has questions, but feel free to chime in and cut me off at any time if you have questions. But as I'm driving, I got all kinds of questions kind of popping up into my head. So the first one being, when you're in relation to open adoption, is there like a standard or a norm for the amount of contact that is allowed for an open adoption from the person that's relinquished custody?
Okay, first of all, the courts don't ever order an open adoption. So they cannot say you must do this. Open adoption is an agreement between the parents, the adoptive parents and the biological parent, and you can agree to anything you want. So if you want to have if it's some distant relative and you know that person and your child gets close to that person, you can let your child spend the weekend with that person, or you can say, I will just send you pictures, but nobody's going to tell you how to do it.
Okay. So there is no cutoff of so that they don't cause disruption. So especially if it's somebody that you just don't know, chose.
Let me tell you, I remember placing a child with a woman in Connecticut when I was a CPS worker, and she was very worried about that issue. Is the mother going to be intrusive and stuff like that? And my response to her is, you're the parent. If somebody's being intrusive, this is a stranger. This is not somebody who's entitled to any rights to your child at all. Once the adoption is over, you're the parent, you decide. If you think it's a comfortable thing, if you think it's good for your child to have a little contact, then do it. And you call the shots, you name what you want to do. But the other side, the parent who's relinquished has no ability to decide how that's going to be.
Gotcha.
Okay? That makes sense.
So at any time you can cut off communication if you choose to, even though it's an open adoption.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay. There was a question that was in the chat just now. What's a good place to start if you're?
I would say Depelsion is a good place to call. It
do
depends
they do?
on if you want older children, huh? It said that the question said, what would be a good place to start? Family services, Depelsion. I think you could do that if you're looking for, there's no child there that's being offered to you. I would call Catholic Charities is good. Depelsion is good. There is an agency, I think, who's dealing with some of the kids with border issues. I'm not sure. I don't want to get into all that, but there are different agencies, especially if you're looking for a younger child. If you're willing to take an older child or a child with issues or a child with siblings, you can certainly talk to CPS. A lot of times which I don't really agree, but I've seen this thing on Facebook where they're advertising these kids and they go to this place and they all play and then the parents get to choose who to talk to. It's a little creepy to me because the kids feel like they're sort of being shown around and it's like going to, I don't know.
The adoption pairs.
Yes, I don't like that. I actually wasn't a fan of the big Christmas adoptions either, where everybody comes in and all the kids are there and a whole bunch of families and they're all adopted together and everybody's so happy. Because I know the grief that accompanies that. And yeah, it's a happy day. It's great. And they all have a good time and everybody's happy. But I think it's such a personal matter that and adoptive parents are willing to do anything because they're so happy this is happening. But I just was uncomfortable with it. And some judges did it and some didn't. And that was fine. But it's a very complicated emotional issue that I think people need to look at all the dimensions with regard to that. Okay.
Another
Anything else?
question that I had. Another
Okay,
question
good.
I had. So, and I hate to reduce this to like buying a car or like buyer's remorse or whatever, but at any time or when can somebody, or is there a time frame for when somebody chooses to change their mind? So if you've got someone that's, in the hospital, just gave birth, and then 2-3 days later they decide, no, I don't want to do this. Is it too late then at that point? Or if somebody adopts a kid and then they decide, I don't know that I'm cut out for this, I don't really want to go through with it, can I
Okay.
not do this?
If you adopt
there
a
time
child,
frame?
okay, if you adopt a child, the court signs the adoption, you're the parent, period, end of story. There's ways
No
that you
take
can
backs.
give up your child, but you're done. A mother who like relinquishes, she has to do it after a certain period of time. So she can't sign that relinquishment for so many hours after she's given birth. And then in the relinquishment, it's a statement about how long you have to change your mind if you've signed off. And different states have different agreements. There's different things you can put into the relinquishment here in Texas, whether it's you have 3 days, you have 6 days, 11 days, or this is it. A lot of it depends on the paperwork that's filed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. What's the other question that I had here? There was something else. Oh, what's a big, in your experience, what's the biggest misconception that people have about adoption? Or what would you say is the biggest misconception? Or, yeah.
Maybe that everything is going to be rosy. But anytime you raise your own kids, no matter what, there's going to be issues. So, but a misconception, I think people have a misconception about the reason people give up their children or relinquish their children sometimes. Sometimes they have a misconception about the father and why he's disappeared. They assign negative motives to people quite often. But most people who go through it, I think have a pretty good idea of what it's about, because by the time they get through it, if they've relinquished, they know it's over. They know these are not their children anymore. And I don't even know if they really think of them as their children. They might think of them, but I think they feel like this is not my child. This so-and-so is adopted and I'm good with that. And so I don't know if I would think of adopting, having a lot of misconceptions.
I mean, what I was thinking about that when she asked that, we as parents, I have 4 of my own, and we as parents go through different stages with our children. I mean, but we still love them through the process. So when you're adopting, I think at first it's scary, I'm sure, but you still go through that learning process as we as parents do, as learning each of your children, learning what works, what doesn't work with your child. And, at times you're going to go through the stressful time of teenage years and the ruffle and struggle, but at the end, I think even if you're an adoptive parent or not or a natural parent, you're still going to work through the process. Now, the only thing you're going to have with an adopted, your child may want to someday want to find out who their parent, but that's something you should be ready for, you know.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say something. Yeah, they do. Sometimes they want to search. And sometimes, but usually they have to wait. I don't know if I would let my 13-year-old search for her parent, because you don't always find a great parent. Sometimes you find somebody who's barely hanging on. And then kids start to doubt their own identity. They start to doubt who they are. They want a parent who is the princess who gave them up. And so, yeah, I think kids do want to know. They want to know their history. Mostly they want to know their siblings. That's a real big issue for kids who are adopted. They want to know who they're connected to on their same level. And that's a big deal, much more than a parent, because I think they already have a parent. And most kids who are adopted into happy families are like, yeah, my parent was fine, but I might have other siblings out there that might be interesting. And so I can understand that. Yeah, I think that's true.
I think myself, when you have families out there that are willing to open up their lives and their hearts to even be foster parents, I think when you yourself dedicate your house, whether it's to someone else's child, you're getting married, and you've raised this child, even in that scenario, I think, to me personally, they're heroes, because there's so many children out there that need families, that need either one parent. I mean, even if you're a single parent, and that's one question if you're a single parent and your life is doing well, you're a professional, is it that difficult for you to become an adopted child if you're interested?
No, single parents are adopting all the time.
It's awesome.
If you can, just like you can have a baby. I mean, half the babies born in Harris County are born to people who are not married. So no, they're not making value judgments with regard to that. If you're on top of things and you know what you're doing and you have a relationship or you're capable of it, being single is not an issue.
And you know what? I honestly think they're, like I was saying before, I think they're heroes. I think when you take a child and you bring them into your home and you hold them close and you give everything you've got and you've opened up your heart to a child that is in need of love, I think you yourself is a hero. And not only you, but so is that child, because that child is coming in afraid, especially if they're younger, and even teenage. They have to be afraid. So both of you are heroes in the process of joining into this amazing process of living life together and going on forward. So, I mean, I applaud any parent that knows that they are not able to maintain or help their children, if they are strong enough to say, okay, I love my child, but I love them so much that I know I cannot take care of them, and I need to go ahead and let someone else that could give them much more than I can. I think they're the heroes also. So I think the adoption process is a beautiful process. It can be hurtful, just like you said, sad, but at the same time, I think there's so many heroes in this adoption process that it's a winning process at the end.
I think it is. I think that's true.
And you know what? I think if many more human beings thought about giving back and saying, hey, I can handle it. I'm a single mother. I'm a single woman, or I'm a single man, and I might have not been able to find my right relationship, but you know what? I've got my life situated in a sense that, hey, I'm ready to have a child or adopt a child. You should be a hero also. It's going to be an interesting process, but I think that process, the end through the journey, would be a beautiful process.
So
No, I agree.
I know
Yeah. Go ahead.
you kind of gave the locations of where to kind of start, but what is needed to start? Like, is there a particular paperwork, or are there things that need to kind of be in order or in line so that, you know, the adoption process is simpler? Like, what do you need to gather to even start? So
Well, I think you have to find the child you want to adopt. And as I say, there's different ways you can get kids. If you have no idea, then I think it's a good idea to call some of these agencies and see, you know, if somebody hasn't offered you a child, or you don't know somebody who's going to give birth to a child and give the child away, then I think you need to go through some of these agencies. You don't have to really get anything ready. I mean, they're going to come in, they're going to ask you stuff. Something has to be filed with the courts about requesting for the termination adoption if the child's not free, or just for the adoption. But that can be done. That's very simple. People do it on their own. There's things you have to do, but the paperwork itself isn't a big deal. You have to want the wherewithal. And then, as I say, if you go to Depulsion, if you go to some of these others, they're going to ask you to take classes. They're going to give you information about what to do. If you're a grandparent and you're adopting your grandkids because of issues that have happened, then it'd be better if you could talk to an attorney. It can be done if your son or daughter is willing to relinquish the children and you're a grandparent to adopt. It can be done relatively simply by filing paperwork with the court, but you have to have the parent agreeing, and you have to have the paperwork that asks for it, and then a final order granting adoption. So those things people do on their own. It's a little daunting to go to court as a pro se litigant, which is what they're called. But we do look over paperwork and stuff. But a lot of times there's places that will do your adoption or direct you to places that can help you get that done.
But initially, it's best to find the child that you are.
Yeah, if you don't have a child, then, and if you really want to adopt and you have that feeling, you go to one of these agencies and you say, I'm looking, you know, what do you think? And what's your process? And how long does it take? And if I'm willing, and I mean, they have a lot of these adoption agencies have not, I hate to say books of kids, but they have a lot of children who are available. When I was a CPS worker, we would say, okay, we have a child that's free for adoption now. And then all these agencies would send home like the custody evaluations to us. And we would pick out a home that we thought might be a good home. Now, each state is different how they do that. But you have to, if you have a relative that you want to adopt, that's one thing. If you really don't know where to start, I would start with an adoption agency because they can direct you. There's also some that are, if you're looking for a foreign adoption, but those are probably pretty expensive.
So would you recommend that somebody become a foster parent before full-on adoption?
Well, you have to, it's different. Getting a 6-month-old baby from somebody who's relinquished their child is different than getting a 5-year-old who's dealt with parents who have all sorts of problems and who've been forcibly taken out of the home. So you have to decide what kind of person you are, what you can handle, being your emotional, your financial, where you are, how much you work, your availability. And if you're interested in taking a child who's been through some things, that you call CPS, they will direct you. They will talk to you about their foster parent program. And I'm sure in the foster parent program, because you have to go through a series of classes there, hopefully online. I don't know how they do it anymore, but I'm sure they will talk to you about the possibility of adoption and things like that.
Okay.
Okay.
There was
Well,
another
Ms.
question.
Patterson, Ms.
Yes.
Deborah, thank you so much. I think this presentation has been eye-opening, heart-opening, overwhelmingly beautiful presentation. And we, the Month of Service Partners, are very grateful for
I
this
hope people
presentation.
got their questions answered. I know it's a very specific thing, and I don't have a lot of general answers because there's all different scenarios, but you can do it if you want to. If you want to adopt, there are kids out there, and it doesn't matter. A whole bunch of things that you worry about are not going to matter. is how mature you are and can you take care of this child? And if people see that you can get this done. Okay, thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Bye-bye. Appreciate it. Take care.
I'm sure there's going to be so much more that's going to come to mind right after we hang up this broadcast, I'm sure.
Oh,
But
yeah,
if,
yes. I was thinking the
if-
same thing, Nia. I was thinking, oh my gosh, she was amazing. She was a wonderful presenter, very detailed. And I was just thinking, oh my God. I mean, I was writing everything down that she was saying. It was just heartwarming. I loved it. And I'm sure a lot of our community members are going to start sending us texts and emails asking us, what about this? What about that? And we'd love to have Ms. Patterson back so we can ask her those questions that are going to be coming in, rolling in. I mean, I know myself, you know, when you and I get off here and we start talking, you and I are going to jump off. Oh, what about this? What about that? So I thought she was amazing and just heartful. Just my heart just went berserk.
indeed, that is something to have the opportunity to have that kind of an impact on somebody's on a child's life. That's what I wanted to ask. I knew it. Like scams, what is it that people do to protect themselves against those like adoption scams and stuff like? Because I know that they're out there, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and people telling you to pay money and do all this other kinds of stuff, and you know, that's what I wanted to ask her about. What do they do for that?
They're having someone is a surrogate mother and for you. And I didn't think about that. That's
Yeah,
okay.
that
We're
was the
gonna
thing.
get
That was
back
the
in
thing.
3 months and we're gonna have our okay, surrogate mother. What happens with this? What happens with that?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I think that's about it for now. If there are additional questions that any of our participants do have, then please feel free to reach out to Myra or myself, and we'll do our best to direct your questions to Ms. Deborah to get them addressed for you, or to find out what other resources or services are available. I will send out a link of the recording of this session. And again, we are broadcasting live on our Amos Houston TX on Facebook. So if you want to join and rewatch the presentation there, you can as well. When I send out the link, I will also put the contact information for the Harris County Domestic Relations, as well as the Pelchin and Family Services, for you guys to get more information about adoption, if that's the route that you're interested in taking as well. So thank you again for tuning in this afternoon for another A Month of Service presentation. We invite you guys to come back out and join us again. What do we have tomorrow? Today's Wednesday. Today's Monday. No, today's Tuesday. Tomorrow we have our final Money, Health, and Wealth financial capability presentation about spending money over the holidays. Holiday spending. You know, that's a big one now. And
Yes,
a lot of
my
people are still
husband.
going through. A lot of people still going through financial hardship and feeling like that they have to spend X amount of dollars, you know, for the holidays, or how to keep yourself from overspending during the holidays. And then on Thursday, we have our wills and estate planning and why you need it, or wills and advanced planning and why do you need it. A lot of times people think, you know, oh, I don't own anything, and you know, I don't have anything to offer. Why do I need to have a will, and so on and so forth? And there's a whole lot of misconceptions about having a will or an estate plan and other documents that make up an estate plan, other than just a will. Especially over the time of COVID, when people realized the importance of having an estate plan in place,
Yes.
the importance of guardianship, powers of attorney, health, advanced directives, and things of that nature. All of those documents make up an estate plan that needs to be put in place, that people sometimes really just don't think about. So you definitely want to join us on Thursday for that.
I think about protecting your generational wealth. I think it's so important that we need to be able to pass on what we've worked so hard to, you know, it may be an earring, it may be a car, it may be a sofa, whatever, but you've worked so hard to work to get that, and to be able to pass it on to your heirs, and your heirs to be able to say, hey, my grandmother, Myra Hippolyte, you know, 50 years ago worked so hard for this earrings, and I am wearing these today in honor. I think that is just amazing. We've lost communities because a lot of our community members didn't have a will, did not create a TOD, a transfer on death deed, did not protect their generational wealth. So with this class that's coming up, I think it's amazing and wonderful that we all teach each other, even me, how to protect your generational wealth and pass it on. But one thing I wanted to tell you about the Christmas spending, ladies and husbands. I'm going to tell you, my husband already saw this little schedule here. He says, I think you need to pass.
You need to become a client and not.
He said, well, you haven't learned it. And I tell him, I love you too. But, you know, Nia and I are always taking these virtual workshops, and he says, I haven't learned anything about saving. But it's Christmas, so we all love each other through the process.
All right. Well, that being said, if there are any virtual workshops that we do not currently offer that you guys are interested in, then please let us know. We are in the process of planning our 2023 schedule. Again, if you could just take a couple of minutes and fill out the survey following this presentation, that would be wonderful. Again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Myra and myself. We hope that you all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon, and take care of yourselves and stay safe out there.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe.
Thank
Have
you.
fun, though.